In the heart of a sleepy farm town, a shy girl's quiet life shatters when cruel bullies tie her to a tree, mocking her dreams and spirit. But they didn't know her secret. Her husband, a battle-hardened Delta Force operative, is only one call away. What happens next will leave you breathless, vengeance, redemption, and jaw-dropping twists that'll keep you glued to every word. Subscribe now to dive into this gripping 12,000-word tale of loyalty, justice, and the unbreakable bond of love. Crafted to thrill readers across the USA and UK. The sun dipped low over the rolling fields of Willow Creek, Nebraska, casting golden hues across the endless rows of corn and wheat that framed Ellie Mae Thornton's world. At 26, Ellie was the kind of woman who blended into the background's slight frame. Freckled cheeks, and auburn hair tucked under a faded baseball cap. She was known around town as the quiet farm girl, a moniker that carried both affection and pity from the locals. Her days were predictable, tending the family farm, feeding the chickens, and repairing the old tractor that groaned louder each season. The farm, a sprawling 200 acres passed down from her grandfather, was her sanctuary, a place where the world's noise faded into the rustle of leaves and the hum of cicadas. But even sanctuaries have their shadows, and for Ellie, those shadows took the form of whispers and sidelong glances from the town's younger crowd, particularly a group of local troublemakers led by Travis Boone. A broad-shouldered 20-something with a permanent sneer, was the son of Willow Creek's wealthiest landowner. He'd never worked a day in his life, coasting on his father's name and a penchant for cruelty. His Pasajik, Mitch, and Leela followed his lead, their laughter a constant menace at the town's only diner or gas station. They'd targeted Ellie since high school, when her shy demeanor and hand-me-down clothes made her an easy mark. Back then, it was taunts about her hillbilly accent or snickers when she'd stutter through a class presentation. Now, years later, the bullying had escalated, fueled by Travis's boredom and a twisted need to assert dominance. Ellie, they thought, was still the same defenseless girl alone, vulnerable, and too meek to fight back. It was late afternoon when the incident happened. Ellie had been hauling bales of hay to the barn, sweat soaking her flannel shirt, when she heard the familiar rumble of Travis's pickup truck. The dust cloud it kicked up was a warning, but she had no time to retreat. Travis and his crew spilled out, their laughter sharp as broken glass. "Well, look at Farmer Ellie, still playing in the dirt," Travis drawled, tossing an empty beer can toward her feet. Ellie kept her head down, gripping the pitchfork tighter, hoping they'd tire and leave, but Lila, with her venomous grin, egged Travis on. "Bet she's still waiting for her knight in shining armor," she mocked. "Ain't no one coming for you, sweetheart." The words stung, but Ellie bit her lip, refusing to give them the satisfaction of a reaction. She didn't know they'd planned something worse today. The group circled her, their taunts growing bolder. Jake grabbed the pitchfork from her hands, tossing it into the dirt. Mitch shoved her toward the old oak tree at the edge of the field, its gnarled branches a silent witness to decades of farm life. Before Ellie could protest, they were on her Travis, producing a coil of rope from the truck bed. "Let's see how quiet you stay now," he sneered, yanking her arms behind her. The rope bit into her wrists as they tied her to the tree, the bark scraping her back. Lila snapped photos with her phone, giggling about posting them online with captions like, "Farm Girl's Big Adventure." Ellie's heart pounded, not from fear, but from a simmering rage she rarely let surface. She'd endured their cruelty for years, but this was different. It wasn't just humiliation. It was a violation of the one place she felt safe. As the group laughed and cracked open more beers, Ellie's mind raced. Her phone was in her pocket, just out of reach. She thought of Caleb, her husband, whose existence was a secret to everyone in Willow Creek. Caleb Thornton, a Delta Force operative, had been her high school sweetheart before he enlisted, promising to return for her. They'd married quietly 2 years ago during one of his rare leaves, and he'd been deployed ever since, stationed halfway across the world. No one in town knew, not her neighbors, not her bullies. To them, Ellie was still the lonely farm girl, unworthy of rescue. But Caleb had given her a burner phone for emergencies, a clunky device with one pre-programmed number. If she could just reach it. Travis noticed her squirming and laughed. "What, you think someone's gonna save you? Ain't no heroes in this town, Ellie?" He leaned closer, his breath sour with beer. "You're nothing." That was the moment. Ellie's resolve hardened. She twisted her wrist, ignoring the rope's burn, until her fingers brushed the phone. With a flick, she pressed the call button, praying Caleb was within reach of a signal. The line crackled, then connected. She didn't speak, couldn't. With Travis so close, but she let out a soft, deliberate hum, a signal they'd agreed on. Across the world, in a dusty base camp, Caleb's phone buzzed. His eyes narrowed at the sound of her hum, and he was already moving. Back at the farm, Travis's crew grew bored, tossing their cans into the field and piling into the truck. "Have fun out here, Farmer Ellie," Leela called as they sped off, leaving her tied to the tree as dusk settled. Ellie's heart thundered, but not from fear. Caleb was coming, and when he did, Willow Creek would never be the same. Caleb Thornton was a ghost in the world of men. At 30 he was a man of few words and fewer weaknesses. his body honed by years of grueling Delta Force missions, covert operations in deserts, jungles, and war-torn cities. His team called him Reaper for his precision, but to Ellie, he was just Caleb, the boy who'd carved their initials into the same oak tree she was now tied to. He'd been in Kandahar when her call came, briefing his unit on a high-stakes extraction. The burner phone's buzz cut through the room like a gunshot, one hum, and he knew. Ellie was in trouble. Without a word to his team, he grabbed his gear and headed for the airstrip, pulling every favor to secure a military transport to the States. 20 hours later, he landed in Omaha, his jaw set, eyes like steel. Caleb didn't know the details of what had happened. Deli's hum hadn't carried words, but he knew his wife. She was tough, forged by years of running a farm alone, but she wouldn't call unless it was serious. He rented a nondescript sedan, blending into the Midwest's endless highways, and drove toward Willow Creek. His mind churned with possibilities, each one tightening the knot in his gut. Ellie was his anchor, the reason he survived every mission. The thought of someone hurting her ignited a cold, calculated fury he'd learned to channel in combat. Back in Willow Creek, Ellie spent the night tied to the tree, the ropes chafing her skin as she worked to loosen them. The stars above were her only company, their light a reminder of the nights she and Caleb had spent stargazing, dreaming of a life beyond the farm. By dawn, her wrists were raw, but she'd managed to slip one hand free. She untied herself, stumbling to the farmhouse to clean up and wait. She didn't call the sheriff. Sheriff Dawson was Travis's uncle, and she knew he'd dismiss her story. Instead, she sat by the window, clutching a mug of coffee, her eyes scanning the road for Caleb's car. Caleb arrived at noon, his sedan pulling into the farm's gravel drive. Ellie ran to him, her composure cracking as she buried her face in his chest. His arms, strong and steady, wrapped around her, but his eyes were already scanning the horizon, assessing threats. "Who did this?" he asked, his voice low. "Dangerous?" Ellie recounted the incident, the taunts, the rope, the photos Leela had threatened to post. Caleb's face remained impassive, but his hands clenched, knuckles white. "They're about to learn a lesson," he said simply. He didn't storm into town guns blazing. That wasn't his way. Caleb was a strategist, trained to dismantle enemies with precision. He started by gathering intel. He drove to the diner, blending in with the lunch crowd, listening to the gossip about Travis and his crew. The locals painted them as untouchable, shielded by wealth and connections. Caleb learned their hangouts, the bar, the gas station, the abandoned mill where they partied. He also learned something else. Travis's father, Harlan Boone, had been buying up land around Willow Creek, including failed attempts to strong-arm Ellie into selling her farm. The bullying wasn't just personal, it was part of a larger scheme. That night, Caleb set his plan in motion. He tracked Travis's truck to the mill, where the group was drinking and laughing over Leela's phone. Scrolling through the photos of Ellie, Caleb slipped into the shadows, his training making him invisible. He planted a small GPS tracker on Travis's truck, then returned to the farm to prepare. He didn't tell Ellie the details. She didn't need to know how he operated, but she saw the look in his eyes, the same one he'd had when he'd promised to protect her forever. The next morning, Caleb intercepted Travis alone at the gas station. He didn't touch him, just leaned close, his voice a quiet blade. "You tied my wife to a tree," he said. Travis's smirk faltered, confusion flickering in his eyes. "Wife Ellie," he stammered. Caleb's smile was cold. "You're gonna apologize, and you're gonna mean it." Travis laughed nervously, backing away, but Caleb's presence was a weight, a promise of consequences. Travis bolted to his truck, unaware of the tracker humming beneath. Caleb's plan unfolded with surgical precision. He tracked Travis's movements for 2 days, learning his routines, his weaknesses. Travis was a creature of habit, arrogant, predictable, always surrounded by his crew for protection. But Caleb knew how to isolate a target. He waited until Travis was alone, driving to his father's estate late at night. Caleb cut him off on a deserted road, his sedan blocking the path. Travis swore and honked, stepping out to confront the stranger, only to freeze when he saw Caleb's silhouette. Unyielding, a predator in human form. "I told you to apologize," Caleb said, stepping into the moonlight. Travis's bravado crumbled. He tried to swing, but Caleb caught his fist mid-air, twisting his arm until he dropped to his knees. "This is your one chance," Caleb said. "Go to Ellie, beg for forgiveness, or I come for you again." Travis nodded frantically, sweat beading on his brow. Caleb released him, watching as he scrambled back to his truck and sped off. The next day, Travis showed up at the farm, his crew trailing nervously behind. Ellie was in the barn, repairing a fence, when she saw them approach. Travis's face was pale, his usual swagger gone. "I'm sorry, Ellie," he mumbled, eyes darting to the shadows as if expecting Caleb to emerge. Leela, Jake, and Mitch muttered apologies too, their voices hollow. Ellie stood tall, her quiet strength a contrast to their cowardice. "You don't get to hurt people and walk away," she said. Not anymore. She didn't forgive them. She didn't need to. Their fear was enough. But the story didn't end there. Caleb's return had stirred something in Willow Creek. Rumors spread about the stranger, who'd spooked Travis Boone. Harlan Boone, Travis's father, caught wind of it and saw an opportunity. He'd wanted Ellie's farm for years, eyeing its fertile land for a development deal. Now, he suspected Ellie wasn't as alone as she seemed. He hired a private investigator to dig into her life, uncovering Caleb's identity. Harlan was no fool. He knew a Delta Force operative was a problem, but he also saw leverage. If he could control Caleb, he could control Ellie. Harlan confronted Caleb at the farm a week later, flanked by 2 hired thugs. "I know who you are, Thornton," he said, puffing out his chest. "You think you can scare my boy and walk away? Sell me this land, or I'll make sure your military buddies hear about your little vigilante stunt." Caleb didn't flinch. He'd faced warlords and terrorists. Harlan Boone was just a loud man with money. "You're out of your depth," Caleb said, stepping closer. The thugs reached for their weapons, but Caleb disarmed them in seconds, their guns clattering to the ground. Harlan backed away, his confidence shaken. "This ain't over," he spat, retreating to his car. Ellie and Caleb knew Harlan wouldn't stop. He'd escalate, maybe hire more muscle or lean on his connections with the sheriff. But Caleb had a card to play, one Harlan didn't expect. During his recon, Caleb had hacked into Harlan's email, uncovering a trail of shady deals, tax evasion, land fraud, even bribes to local officials. Caleb compiled the evidence and sent it anonymously to the FBI, with a copy to a reporter at the Omaha World-Herald. Within days, Harlan's empire began to crumble. Federal agents raided his estate, and the headlines screamed of corruption. Travis and his crew, desperate to save themselves, turned on each other, spilling secrets to avoid jail time. The final twist came when Ellie discovered she wasn't just a victim in Harlan's scheme. Her farm sat on a rare mineral deposit, one Harlan had planned to mine for millions. The bullying, the pressure to sell it, had all been part of his plan to break her. But Ellie was no longer the quiet farm girl. With Caleb's help, she hired a lawyer and secured her land's rights, turning the tables on Harlan's legacy. The town, once complicit in its silence, rallied around her. Ashamed of their inaction, Caleb's leave ended, and he prepared to return to his unit. Before he left, he and Ellie stood under the oak tree, its bark still scarred from the ropes. "You're my home," he told her, his voice soft but fierce. Ellie smiled, no longer the girl who hid from the world. "And you're mine?" she said. As Caleb drove away, Ellie watched the horizon, her heart steady. Willow Creek had changed, and so had she. The bullies were gone, their power stripped, and the farm was hers forever.